All right, let's get right into it. We're going to talk about a battle that completely shattered the myth of European invincibility in Africa. I mean, this is a story that literally turned the colonial world upside down.
And, that's not me being dramatic. Think about it. We're going back to the late 1800s. This was the absolute peak of European colonial expansion, right? There was this feeling, this inevitability, that the whole world was just going to be carved up by these powers. But one battle, in this one corner of Africa, was about to challenge that entire idea.
So, picture this. March 1st, 1896, near a town called Adwa in Ethiopia. Something happens that pretty much everyone thought was impossible. You've got an African army led by Emperor Menelik II going up against a modern, well-equipped Italian army, and they don't just win, they crush them. And listen, this wasn't some minor skirmish or little hiccup for the Europeans. No way. This was a decisive victory. It stopped Italy's war of conquest dead in its tracks.
So, the big question is, how? How did Ethiopia pull off the impossible? How did this one African nation manage to defend its independence when so many others couldn't? Well, the answer is just a masterclass in strategy, in leadership, and in completely defying expectations. So let's dive in and break down exactly how they did it.
Okay, so before we get into the how, we really need to get a handle on just how huge this moment was. The victory at Adwa sent absolute shockwaves around the entire globe.
Yeah, this is so important to understand. Adwa wasn't just a military win, it was an ideological earthquake. You have to remember, this was an era where racial hierarchy was treated like scientific fact. So the idea of a black army defeating a white army, it just threw a massive wrench into that whole narrative of European superiority. And even bigger than that, it shattered that myth of inevitability we talked about. All of a sudden, for people all over the African diaspora, Adwa became this incredible symbol of hope. It was proof that history wasn't just some one-way street. It put everything back into play.
So to really get the outcome, you first have to understand the two main players here. These two empires on a collision course. And believe me, they could not have been more different.
So, on one side, you've got Ethiopia. We're talking an ancient state, deep history, led by the incredibly savvy Emperor Menelik II and his wife, Empress Taytu. They were all about playing the long game, super careful, super strategic. Then, on the other side, you have Italy, a brand new nation really, and they were desperate to join the cool kids club of great European powers. Their whole colonial dream, it wasn't about economics or smart strategy. It was, as one source put it, a pathological projection of their leaders' ambitions. It really boils down to this: a war for survival versus a war for prestige.
And right at the heart of Ethiopia's leadership, you had this incredible partnership. Menelik, he was a master strategist, right? He traced his lineage all the way back to King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, which gave him this immense ancient authority. But his real secret weapon was his partnership with Empress Taytu. She was this brilliant political operator, brought a huge power base from the north, and she perfectly balanced Menelik's cautious side with her own, super fierce anti-colonial stance. They were, without a doubt, one of the great political power couples of their time.
But here's the thing. Ethiopia wasn't just relying on military strength. They played a brilliant soft power game, and it was surprisingly modern for the time. Menelik and Taytu launched this really sophisticated PR campaign in Europe. They actually hired European advisors to help shape their image, branding Ethiopia as Africa's Switzerland, this rugged, independent nation. They played up their ancient Christian roots to get sympathy from other Christians in Europe, and they even issued their own modern coins and postage stamps, which were basically the ultimate symbols of a sovereign modern state.
Italy's motivations, on the other hand, well, they were a lot less practical. Even a lot of Italians at the time saw this whole colonial thing for what it was, a total vanity project. I mean, Ethiopia didn't have any obvious economic upside for them. No big resources, no new markets, no land for settlers. This whole push for an Africa Italiana was purely about glory. It was about trying to find national greatness through building an empire, even if it made absolutely zero practical sense.
So, how did it all come to a head? How did these two empires finally end up at war? Well, the road to Adwa was basically paved with about a decade's worth of broken promises and straight-up betrayals.
It really starts back in 1884. Britain cuts a deal with Ethiopia's emperor at the time, Johannes IV. The deal was, hey, help us out in Sudan, and we'll give you free access to this key port on the Red Sea, Massawa. Sounds good, right? Well, just 1 year later, Britain completely turns around and lets Italy, their European rival, occupy that exact same port. One British diplomat even called it a vile bit of treachery. And of course, Italy promised to just stay on the coast, but it wasn't long before they started pushing inland, into the highlands, and that's what led to the first real clash.
So January 1887, Ethiopian forces, led by this brilliant general named Oreste Ilg, set a perfect trap for an Italian column near a place called Dogali. Ilg used the terrain like a pro, hiding his men on the hillsides and just raining down fire. The Italians were surrounded and completely wiped out.
Almost 500 Italian soldiers died that day at Dogali, and that number, the Cinquecento, or 500, it became this national obsession back in Italy. In fact, if you go to Rome today, the main square right in front of the central train station is still named the Piazza dei Cinquecento, the Square of the 500, in their honor. This defeat was a massive shock to the Italian system.
But here's the crazy part. Instead of making them maybe rethink their whole colonial plan, Italy just spun the disaster. They turned it into this myth of heroic martyrdom. They started comparing it to the ancient Battle of Thermopylae, with the Spartans. They painted their invading soldiers as these noble heroes making a last stand. And that's the key takeaway here. This whole story of a humiliating defeat that had to be avenged, it created this unstoppable political drive for an even bigger war.
And that set the stage for the final decisive showdown. After what happened at Dogali, a full-blown war was pretty much inevitable.
And when you look at the stakes, man, the difference is just night and day. For Ethiopia, this was a fight for absolutely everything. Their independence, their identity, their very existence as a free nation. For Italy, it was a fight for prestige, for a seat at the big kids' table of empires, and of course, to avenge the national humiliation of Dogali. So you had a nation literally fighting for its life, on a collision course with an empire fighting for its pride. And the conflict that was about to unfold wouldn't just decide the fate of Ethiopia, it was going to send a powerful message to the entire world. Because what the victory at Adwa really showed the world was that European domination wasn't some law of nature. It proved that with brilliant leadership, incredible strategic thinking, and just unbreakable will, the thing that seems inevitable can be stopped. Adwa is this powerful reminder that history is never a closed book. It is always, always in play. Which kind of makes you wonder, right? Who has the will to turn the next page?